Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight or today, whenever it is that you're watching this. My name is Jessica, and I'm a leader here at Something to Chew On, where we believe that every woman has a story that needs to be heard. Every woman, not just the ones that seem like they're high and powerful. Twice a month, we have women share their authentic stories with us on our monthly topic, and then we continue the conversation on our Facebook page. So the topic this month is perfectly imperfect, which I love coming off of last month's topic of a new me, because let's face it, no matter how hard we try to transition smoothly, things are always imperfect. Our verse this month is Ephesians 4:2, which says, "Always be humble and gentle, be patient with each other, making allowances for each other's faults because of your love." And if you're new around here, I love to read a bunch of different translations to really get the full picture. And I love the Passion Translation of this one that says, "With tender humility and quiet patience, always demonstrate gentleness and generous love towards one another, especially towards those who may try your patience." Love it. So basically what Paul is saying here is be kind to everyone because you don't know their story. Our speaker tonight is Lisa Bridges. I actually first met Lisa at Rita Springer's Dive Worship Intensive back in 2012, which is crazy to think it was that long ago. She is originally from Huntsville, Alabama, but she now calls Seattle, Washington home. It has been an interesting transition for her from being in a place full of family and friends to a place of very few friends. She believes that transitions are God's way of teaching us to always live life perfectly imperfect. She currently works for the Department of Homeland Security for the U.S. Coast Guard, but in her free time, she enjoys cooking, writing, and spending time with new friends. She is single and waiting for her husband, and she believes that God has called her to be a gatherer of people into community. No wonder she jumped at the chance to share part of her story with us. So hello, Lisa. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, Jessica. It's so great to see you, and I'm so honored to be here. Of course, I jumped. Yes, God has called me to be a gatherer, but He's also called me to teach and speak. And when I saw it, it was just like, I'll say yes, because it's still scary, even over a virtual platform for me.
Yeah.
Um, but yes, so I am originally from Huntsville, Alabama, which most people don't know. I'm sure most people in Connecticut have never heard of. But if you think of NASA, if you think of where the new Space Command is going to be, that's Huntsville, Alabama. So we have a very large concentration of PhDs actually and engineers. So that's always fun. There's tons of smart people. And it's great. I love my hometown. But you're probably saying, how did you find Seattle? And it would be my friend Holly, she's originally from Huntsville, but I always tell her, you're not Southern anymore. You lived in Australia too long. So her and her husband are from Australia. He's actually a Kiwi, so he's a New Zealander.
Okay.
But they're from Australia, and he works for PushPay, which if most people that go to a church have probably, especially now, have heard of PushPay, because they are probably one of the largest, that number, that code you get, 77977, that's PushPay.
Okay.
So you can do your monthly giving, that's PushPay.
Perfect.
And when COVID started, they had to really jump on it. Like, they were real busy. But Holly and I have been friends for 20 years. And like ever since I gave my life to the Lord, we've been friends. And she told me, she's like, yeah, I'm going to be, Jeremy's, coming. He's going to be working in the States for a while. Because if you don't know, Australia is extremely expensive. Extremely expensive, like, my God. But I was like, yes. And so in 2017, I came up here for Christmas to spend with them, because my birthday is 5 days after. And I was like, I'm going to plan my own birthday party this year.
Yeah, heck yeah.
And it was so much fun. I got to go snow tubing, and I may be an addict now. It is so much fun. Like, for a person that doesn't love roller coasters, I could snow tube all day.
All right.
The thrill of going down that hill and spinning and not knowing where you're gonna. I don't let the guides push me, because they like to spin you a lot, and I'm like, I don't want to throw up. Like, I don't want to spoil it for everybody else because I got sick.
Yeah.
So let's just let whatever's gonna happen happen. But on my way up, I love to fly, and I was just in the air, and I always have my earbuds in, listening to worship music when I fly. And I was just looking out the window, and it was so beautiful. And God's like, hey, do you want to go on an adventure? I was like, yeah. And I just thought, this trip is going to be an adventure. That is not what he meant. And so fast forward to 2018, I go to a Jesus Culture Heaven Come conference, and I've already started to feel this transition. And I'm just like, am I just moving like to a house and selling my condo? Like, what's going on? The Lord's like, no, I've called you to move. And move how? And he's like, you're going to move. And I'm like, well, I don't know where to move. And I sought some wisdom from a good friend. And she just said, write down the cities that you feel like you could live in. Well, that made me excited, because, I mean, Texas, Nashville, North Carolina, they were all top 3. And I said, I'll just throw Seattle in, just because, Holly and Jeremy are there right now. So, I'll just throw it in.
Yeah, that could be fun.
That could be fun, but never thinking that was what God was going to do. And within a month, it was just like, you better say yes to Seattle, because he's saying you're moving. And I was like,
wow.
And I said yes. It was confirmed so many times within that one day of me saying yes, and messaging my friend Holly and saying, I don't know what God's doing in you guys, but I'm coming to be a part of that. She didn't really get it, because she was in Australia at the leadership conference for Hillsong at the time, and it was really late at night. And she's like, that's great. Later on, she's like, she's just telling me what was happening to them. Like, we're not moving. God's called us to live in Seattle. And I was like, yeah. She's like, so I don't know where you're going. I was like, okay, maybe you missed what I was saying to you. I'm moving to Seattle. And she's like, what? So that started the process. So then I knew, like, sometimes in transition, you have to pray. Well, you always have to pray, but you have to pray like, okay, well, what's the next step, Lord? I've said yes. What's the next step? Show me. And I just knew from my parents, who are older, and especially for my dad, that I needed to know that I had a good, stable job, and I was going to be okay. And so I started looking for a job and all those things. And I actually, everything always seemed to happen. Like, I had a plan of how I wanted to happen, but then God's plan was like, no, do these things. Boom, there it is. And you're like, wait, you move real fast, and I need you to slow down. My plan had a process to it. Okay. And so I applied for a job at the end of May, and by July the 19th of 2019, I was on a plane to Seattle. And I literally, it's still a whirlwind. I'm like, what? Okay, well, here I am. Praise the Lord. But in that transition, I was leaving everything. And it didn't really hit me until that last day, like the last day, because my best friend is a mom and has 5 kids, and they are my godchildren. And so she was taking me to see the lady that I had talked to when I knew that I was in transition, or the beginning of transition. And when I was getting ready to get out of the car, I thought, oh, I'm not okay. Tomorrow I get on a plane. I'm really not seeing. So I'm walking in the Target, and bless the people that had to see me, because I was like full out sob. Like, it was just not pretty. It was not pretty. But fast forward, I moved. I found an amazing apartment, amazing. And I start my job. It's a 30-mile drive. But I know that was all a setup of the Lord, because I spent that time, like, I love worship music. So I would have my worship music and my ways at the same time. Like, okay, tell me where to turn, but then just play worship music for me.
Right.
And so that was really great. But going into somewhere new, I actually ended up with a job with World Vision. So going into somewhere new was terrifying. And, you know, I know who I am, but they don't know who I am. And it's like, okay, how do I balance this? And so you were kind of I wear my feelings. I don't know how everybody is, but I wear my feelings on my, you know, like they're just right here. They're just resting right here. They're kind of going down the sleeve when I'm in a new environment. And so we had part of World Vision is every Wednesday we have chapel. And sometimes I would forget that it was time, or I'd hear the little, like they would come on the intercom system. It would scare me every time, y'all. Every time. You know, like, good morning. And I'm like, hey, how you doing? But usually one of my coworkers would come around and say, hey, we're headed up. So I would have somebody to sit with because I was new. And this one day they didn't. And when I say hurt feelings came real quick. And I was just like, And so I said, no, because I feel like part of being perfectly imperfect is that first part of the scripture. And I'm so glad you read the Passion, because that's like my favorite. What it says is,
always go, it's my default.
It is my default. But it says walk in humility and patience. And I feel like we don't get to humility if we're not vulnerable, even just with ourselves, and honest with ourselves about, okay, well, this made me feel this way.
Yeah.
And so because I did that, I said, nope, I'm still going to chapel. I don't care. I'm gonna sit by myself. And that chapel, I sobbed like a baby. And the Lord spoke to me and he was like, they weren't doing anything to you, but you need to learn how to stand on your own 2 feet. Okay, well, thank you, Lord. I'm so glad that today was the day you chose to spank me.
Yeah. While I'm at work.
While I'm at work and I feel like this. And so I never even brought that up to them. But then there was another situation while being there where one of my coworkers, because I sell beauty counter and I use beauty counter, and I was just telling her about it, and she was like, because it's, you know, you have to buy it from a website and it's not cheap, but it lasts. I'm like, you know, trying to explain it to her, and she's like, oh, Lisa, you're just bougie. And it was like she was cutting me.
Yeah.
I don't like that word. I don't, you know, and so I was like, okay, I'm going to have to address this. But then you have to come back to humility,
right,
and patience, and then generous love. And you're like, Lord, okay, well, I just want to tell them how I feel about this. And Lord's like, no, you're gonna walk this out, and I'm gonna show you when to speak about it. And so it wasn't until we were in COVID, because she didn't do it like every day. She didn't just walk by, Lisa, that's bougie Lisa, you know. Right. And so there was a day we were having one of our Zoom meetings, and she said, oh, Lisa, you're just so bougie. And I said, hey, Brenda, can you please not say that to me? And I said, because I don't like that word. I don't like that word to be used about me. And I just please don't. But I said it in so much love and so much grace. There wasn't any anger, because we had, in the process of that, instead of just saying that person offended me and I don't want anything to do with them, I purposed to get to know who she was. And I realized, I'm like, she doesn't say things, like she's always trying to edify and build up. And so I realized she's just saying something that she thinks is edifying, but it's not for me.
Right.
And so taking that step back and just listening, I was like, and then we had a separate private conversation. She's like, I'm so sorry. I'm like, I know, it's okay. I love you. And she's always checking on me, even now. As you said, I no longer work for World Vision. And I think that was the big part of my transition that I didn't know was coming that quick. When I first got to World Vision, the Lord very clearly said, he was like, you're not going to be here long. And I was like, but you know, in
I
my
don't know how long
mind,
that actually.
long means, oh, I'm not going to be here like 10 years. I'm like,
Right.
okay, Lord,
Right.
you're not going to make it too much over a year. And you're like, what? You're like, well, you don't know. And you're like, oh, but it's God, he does know.
Right.
And so it just, that was shocking. And so, as COVID goes, I'm working for an organization who really gets their funds from donors, and are, really that's the main way we get funded. And it just was a hard year, and they were having to make hard decisions. And I never was angry because I completely understood it. Our president, amazing. Like, if I could tell I was at Go Work for World Vision, most amazing. I miss it every day, but I knew that God had something else for me. And change is not easy, especially when you just got here. And so I'm going through all these things, and I don't have
Already
my
in the middle
people.
of a ton of changes. Like,
Right.
why are you tossing another one at me?
I'm like, listen, my hands are full. I'm good. And he's like, nope, there's more room. And I'm like, okay. But we're in a pandemic, and I just don't really get to leave my house. And when I found out, my boss let me know. He's like, hey, we're going to be terminating your position. I was like, okay. And I honestly, that day, like, the Lord had already told me. So I cried because I could see, like, the strain and how hard it was for them to even tell me. And I was just like, I just want to hug you guys so you feel better. Like, it's okay. The Lord prepared me.
Right.
But I had a really quick decision to make. And the other part of being perfectly imperfect, because I don't want to just focus on those ones that we have to be patient with, but part of that is, am I going to be vulnerable? Because I had just got invited to this prayer group with the ladies in the small church that I'm a part of. And I had a decision to make. I could either say, hey, this is what I'm walking out, or I could just keep it to myself. And I've learned that doesn't do anybody any good. For me to keep it to myself, it's not going to help anybody.
Yeah, like,
so
we sometimes hold ourselves to a higher standard than everybody else. Like, you can be perfectly imperfect and I will accept you, but
yes,
I can't.
I can't.
Yeah.
I have to have it all together at all times. And it's very interesting in the time frame. Even with my work, I was driving home in my bubble that I created during COVID. I was driving home from my friends. They literally lived 6 minutes from me. And I was driving home, and I was having these conversations of, God, I had this anxiety about not doing my job well. Like, what is that? Why do I have it? How do I communicate? Because I wanted to just make sure that my boss was pleased with the work that I was putting out. And but I could never articulate it, and I could never say it. But it was in this process of, because they provided this whole company that helped people that their positions were being eliminated, find jobs, and they had that service for a year or 6 months. And I'm just like, first of all, that's awesome.
Yeah.
But that process, the lady that I had, I just really believe that she loved Jesus, because it was like she could tell. And so one day she was like, it's okay for you to be sad and for you to grieve. And sometimes we don't know we need permission
Right.
to be okay with ourselves not being perfect, and that we're imperfect, and that things can come in and hurt us, because even sometimes I can remember back in the day, if somebody offended me, I'd be like, I'm fine.
Right. Yeah.
And you're like, you are not fine. You need to address this so that it doesn't become a root and just like this nasty part,
Right.
that has to get healing later on because you let it fester.
Right. 20 years down the line, you're upset about
down the line, you're like, oh. And so after I got off the phone with her, because sometimes the person that we need to tell that we're not okay is God. And sometimes we need to tell him, you know what? And that day I was telling him, I feel like you dropped me. I feel like you brought me here. You asked me to do this. You told me this is where you were sending me. and that there's all these beautiful things, all these promises that you've promised me that I don't see them. Where's it at? Like,
You're walking in the wilderness. Like, what the heck?
Yeah, I am in the wilderness. Could you throw me something? Could you show me? And he was like, just trust me. And that day, I had sat down right prior to that and just went and started going through my old journals. And that's where I found what God had spoken to me. And sometimes when we're writing in our journals, we don't take into consideration what he's really saying and what he's really telling you about who you are. And then you go back and read, you're like, oh my gosh, he said that. Which the first thing that I realized he was saying was, hey, I called you to work in the government. I don't know why you keep leaving. I need you to go back. And I'm like, so even in my job search, it was like, forget it. I mean, you can't go work for Boeing. You can't go work for Microsoft.
Yeah. That's
not where I've called you. This is where I've called you. So you better go look for those government jobs. Okay. And I'm like, oh gosh. Okay. But in my journal, he spoke to me and said, I've called you to gather people. Like, I'm literally preparing your table so that you can gather people around it, to tell stories to talk to for me. And I'm like, and I read that, I went, oh. It's like, light bulb. And you're just like, I saw that. I remember writing that. But maybe I should stop and read after I write so that I really get it.
Right.
And I read that and I went, okay, all right, Lord. And it really helped me know, like, the things, because the company that was helping me find jobs also said, you get to ask for what you want. You need to communicate what you need. And I was like, wow, I never felt so empowered. And I was like, yes. And I started writing down. I was like, okay, Lord, because yes, I can ask them, but I wanted to partner with God.
Right. Yeah.
To say, this is what I need. And I need to be able to work in 4 days what most people want to do in 5 days. So I can have that day to, if I want to have a lady over who is a stay-at-home mom, I can do something that's within her schedule.
Right.
And I can use my table to do the things that he's called me to do.
So
and find those other imperfect people, build relationships with people that I never would, have time to go get done things that I need to get done.
Right.
But I think half of that I already knew, but then the other half is like, oh, you did that for that. So like, when you live in an apartment, it's like, you're so smart, Lord. I don't know. And when you live in an apartment, your neighbors come and go. But in this season, even in that, I've had to go, oh, this could be part of my community. And so there's a lady that moved in over the summer, and she's an older lady. First of all, I did not know she was 80. And she told me that I almost fell over. You don't look 80. I'm talking about this lady walks like 4 times a day, speed walking. I'm like, I couldn't even do that with you. I won't ask if I can walk with you because I don't walk that fast. But she's like, how are you doing, Lisa? If she sees me, she's out, she has a cute little dog, and she sees me and I'm coming in with her. She's like, do you need help? And I'm like,
no, I help you.
What? And God's like, if she wants to help you, you need to let her in. And I was like, Lord, okay. So you kind of, you learn these things. But in this process, I got the job with the Coast Guard, and I just started in January. And that was a process within itself. Listen, not only, so the people that interviewed me, none of those people are still there. So the guy that I thought was going to be my supervisor is gone. And I'm just like, Lord, every time I think that I have like somebody, because we had started to build camaraderie, and I'm like, they fly out the window, Lord. I mean, what is this? And so now my supervisors are on the East Coast, which makes everything really fun. So he's like, hey, we're going to have a meeting. No, I said, I can be there. He's like, you're going to get up at 6 to be it. I said, yeah, I'll do it. And me saying like, listen, now that's not what I would prefer to do, but if this is when the meeting is, I'm not going to ask everybody to change it for one person.
Right.
And so it's helping me meet my new supervisor that I don't know, that I have no relationship with, where he's at, because he's working basically 2 jobs for one pay, because he was already a supervisor for all these people. Now he has all these people, you know?
Yeah.
And it just really causes you to, because sometimes we can, or I can, I'm not going to say we, I'm going to say I'm one of those like, okay, what's your motive, people? And so even for me in reading the scripture again, I was like, okay, Lord, I hear you. Because the whole part of it is we have to walk in humility and patience. But the bigger part of it is we have to demonstrate generousness, or generosity, and gentleness, and love. And
Right.
So we're vulnerable, but it's the demonstrating the gentleness. And I'm like, but we think about it, gentleness is a fruit of the Spirit.
Yeah.
So it's really not our responsibility, because if you look at Matthew 11, like 28, 29, it talks about where if we take his yoke, and he gives us his humbleness and his gentleness. Right. I'm like, I just need to keep giving up all this stuff that I'm holding on to you. Oh, okay. Easier said than done. And, you know, in the process, like, I just got my work laptop Monday.
Oh, wow.
I've been working for a month.
Yeah.
And instead of like, you know, I could have gotten upset, but I'm like, you know what? You have to like start to go, you know what? I'm not going to be angry about this. I've gotten this job. It's great. Everybody is working to get, you know, to help me get what I need.
Right.
So I'm going to appreciate it. And I'm not a fan of texting, because you can't tell people. So this lady that I was having to deal with to get my laptop, she's just very short answered. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm gonna like her. And the Lord's like, hey, you don't know her. And I was like, oh, okay. All right, Lord. And so once I met her in person, I was like, oh yeah, we're gonna be cool. I like her, you know. And the Lord's like, see, I told you. And I was like, yeah, you're right. But it's those things. So it's also the generous love. And we were talking about this earlier, because in part of the process of transition, not only are you like, I'm looking, you know, and I'm asking the Lord to send friends and show me who's supposed to be a friend and who's just an acquaintance and all those things. I also need a beautician.
Right.
And so I found one, and she had been recommended by one of my coworkers, and she's a traveling beautician, which is great because I live in Seattle, but I live in the suburbs of Seattle. And so, you know, it's like, I don't want to drive all the way to Tacoma to get my hair done. And so it had been going really well. And then we had a little hiccup and some not great communication. But in that, instead of going back and addressing her about that communication and that hiccup, and me deciding she just won't be doing my hair, I said, I think the best thing for me to do for her, and the way I can love her best, is just to pray for her. And, you know, pray for the continued success of her business. Pray that, you know, that the things that are out of balance in her life would come into balance.
Yeah.
And just wish her the best. I think that sometimes we think that all of our love has to be in your face.
Right.
And that's not it. I think the first way we love someone is to pray and ask the Lord, how do we love that person that is getting on our nerves?
Right.
Or is not being really nice to us? I had a situation, and strangely enough, this person is one of the 2 people back in Huntsville that I work with that I still communicate with. But he was my specialist. Like, he worked kind of up under me, and I assigned him work and he worked with me. But he was older, retired veteran, and just sometimes he would think you were coming at him.
Okay.
And so there were days he was really mean to me. Like, I'm driving home crying, like, I don't understand why he's so mean to me. Like, I just want him to succeed. I just want him to do well. And the Lord's like, this is, I took it to the Lord, and the Lord just started to show me, this is hard for him. He used to be here, and now he had to kind of start back over and be here. And he's trying to get back up there, and he thinks that you don't think he can do it. And I'm like, but I do. Like, and so we would have conversations. And then one of the ways the Lord showed me how to love on him was his birthday was coming up. And I knew that his favorite dessert was cheesecake. And I have a friend back in Alabama who makes the best cheesecakes. Like, I go to restaurants and I'm like, it's just, I'll order cheesecake. I'm like, can I just call Lindsay and get her to make me one? I'm like, this is not good. I could tell you about somebody that makes really great cheesecake. But I just got her to make him a cheesecake for his birthday, and I brought it in, and he has talked about that cheesecake every year since then.
Oh, wow.
But it was something, so for me, in my mind, it was just simple. But for him, it was like, you listened, you figured out what really mattered to me, and you met me where I was at. Because I think that's a lot of it, even for ourselves, and understanding that we're all perfectly imperfect.
Yeah.
Is we have to meet even ourselves where we're at, and be okay with where we're at and love ourselves there. Another thing that I like to do is I like to send note cards and letters. I really like to send them anonymously because we're always in a battle with pride.
Yeah.
And I think that's what keeps us from seeing our imperfections is the pride. Like, well, I do this well and I do this well. Right. So I'm always like, okay, let me do this and just do it. And nobody has to know. I send it, somebody gets it, and they don't really know where it came from unless you know my handwriting. And I love that because then you might see and for a while I did it on a regular basis, and I would just see a post, and that would do my heart well. They would post, I just got this anonymous letter. It's not signed, but it was just what I needed. And yes, thanks. And honestly, all I did was I partnered with God to figure out how to love someone who is maybe having a little bit of a hard time, and doesn't know they have some rough edges, but really, they're really going through something. We're all always going through something. So I think that we have to know how to extend one another grace, which is really, I feel like, where the root of patience is in grace.
Yeah.
So if we can do that, it works out really well. And don't shy away from the people who stretch your patience, because sometimes you can find, most of the time, you find diamonds and treasures in those people.
Absolutely.
Another thing that taught me patience was being a youth leader for 20 years.
Ooh, I didn't do 20. I didn't do that long.
Well, I did. And, finally I said, okay, I think I need to step back. But there's a girl that we are still friends. But I met her when she was 13 at youth camp. And she was one of those that would try you. And I used to be really like, just about justice and a very firm speaker. And I learned through her, like, I'm always honest. I'm always going to be honest. But there's a way to even say the things that you need to say to someone so that they still feel the love of Christ in the words that you're saying. Even if it's correction, it still can be said in love. And now this girl still calls me. When she had her first child, she was like, I'm not letting any of my friends come, but I want you there. And I'm like, I don't understand how this is possible, but okay, like, okay. And it's crazy. Like, every step of the way, I remember at her wedding, I thought I was so excited for her and her fiance, then husband now, to be getting married. And as soon as she hit the end of the aisle, I lost it. Like, didn't know I was going to cry that hard. And when I say that this person tried my patience on a yearly, daily basis, sometimes hourly, but when you continue to extend love, you're opening up your heart. And when I saw her walking down the aisle, I was like, I'm just, you know, and people, my friends were on the aisle, and they're like, you didn't know you were going, we knew you were going to cry. And I was like, I didn't know. And they're like passing me Kleenex. I'm like, oh God, you know. And what some would say, you know, because I would hear people complaining about her, and I was always quick to go, you know what? Maybe that's the only side of her that she's shown you, but there's more there, and we always have to look behind everybody's curtain to know we're all walking something out. We're all trying to figure out who we are, who God's called us to be.
Right.
So
we're all imperfect.
We're all imperfect. Let's lump us all in together and love everybody. You know, it's
exactly. You love me, I love you, and have a great day. Yeah.
Yes.
I love that you took our verse and picked it apart and showed us that where is it, that being patient with people and making allowances and loving on people doesn't always look the same. I love that you showed us that sometimes it's praying for someone and walking away, and other times it's grabbing them by the hand and walking with them. A lot of times I think, especially as women, we feel like the best way to love someone is to grab their hand and keep walking with them. And sometimes that's really not the best way to do it. And I also love that you pointed out that gentleness is one of the fruits of the Spirit. And so you take on his yoke, and it's not your responsibility anymore. If you have a hard time being gentle or patient or any of those fruits of the Spirit, it's not on our shoulders. It's not our weight to carry. We just have to Christ, and it comes out.
Yes.
And I loved that. That was so good. Thank you so much, Lisa.
You are so welcome.
It was so good to catch up with you. And
yes,
we should do this again when we don't have to record.
Right.
But if any of you women out there want to join in our conversation, it will be down in the comments. Maybe Lisa and I will jump in there as well. We'll see.
I would love that.
We love all of you, and we're praying for all of you that you just find the best way to love each other this month. Have a great rest of your evening. Lisa, have a great rest of your day. You're just starting out there in Seattle. And we will see you all later. Thank you so much.